Welcome back, everybody. My name is Taylor Martin. This is the best Damn EDC, and today I have another roundup video for you. It's been a long time since I've covered utility knives, like 2 or 3 years. So we have a new one now with mostly new products, or at least newer versions of older products. If you want to see the old one, it's still, I think, mostly relevant. I don't think it's even outdated, but it is a few years old. But I'm not covering any of the old stuff, just new items or newer versions of old items. So with that said, this is the EDC Utility Knife Roundup V2, and let's do the damn thing. So here we are with 10 utility knives. I do have one honorable mention, and I may have mentioned it in the last video. I think I hadn't received mine yet, but we'll get to that. Here is what I think is the best spread or options available for utility knives in 2021. I am missing a newer Chaves. I planned this video a couple months ago, actually, and Chaves released the Flipper CHUB, which I'll talk about. I missed that drop. I wasn't around, missed the drop. Sorry, but it's okay. We'll talk about it, even though I don't have my hands on one. But let's start with the OG, the Rexford Knives RUT. I think this is what really sparked the interest for me back in the day. It was just one of the very first ones that was like this, just a pocket-friendly utility knife. You know, not one of those big Milwaukee fastbacks or something. This was one of the first of its kind, if not the first of its kind, and it's just something that packed a lot of punch in such a tiny package, and I think for that, it's just a great tool, and it's still one of the best. It's one of my favorites. So from V1 to V4, they've changed a few things. Its actual profile has changed a little bit. They've moved some stuff around. There's now a 1/4-inch hex wrench back here, and they've added this little notch in the hexagon so you can put a lanyard in there and still use it. So just tiny little tweaks that have made this thing even better. There's a pry tool now that's a little like upswept just a hair. Yeah, it's just a really, really functional tiny tool that can go on your keychain or disappear in your fifth pocket. So the way this one works is it's like sort of almost like the compression lock from Spyderco or the button compression that you see on a couple of their knives now. It is a little different, but it's similar to that. So you push this button and that button makes this lock bar back here move, and the lock bar just slots into one of these holes, so you can actually choose either of the slots on the blade to use as a lock point. If you have a Linux blade with these the Linux Golds have a 4-slot system, you can actually lock it on any one of those 4, so you can really extend that blade out further, although I think it makes it a little more dangerous to use. You can fine-tune where that blade goes. Actually, before I go any further, there is another change, and that is, if you hear this, there's no rattle. The old version of the Rexford would rattle when you had it closed or opened. The biggest problem I have with it, you do have that blade rattle. There was no magnet inside, so before, if you gave it a little jiggle, it would rattle whether it was open or closed. So that magnet now prevents it from rattling at all, but you can still do my favorite thing, which is just slide that blade back in. So smooth, a little fidgety. These are $165. They come in a million different configurations with different exclusives and stuff with different retailers. It's all titanium, and as I said, kind of like a button lock, but not really. It's got its own little unique lock system, and it does have a few other tools mixed in. That's it. Not much to say about it, other than I think it's one of the most versatile because it's so small, and with the lock system that it uses, you can add additional, like with that 4-slotted Linux Gold blade, you can fine-tune how far that blade comes out, which is really, really handy sometimes. Yeah, there you have it. That's the Rexford RUT. Next up, this is easily the most talked about by me because, well, this is my version of this tool, the TPT Slide from Big Idea Design. Obviously, I think I've got one. Nope, all of the TPT slides I have here are topo. So this is my version of this tool. The reason I have a version of it, as I've explained before, is that it is my favorite. And I think it's just because it's very, very similar to the Rexford RUT, just like the original TPT Slide was. It's a very similar design, but they took that design and just made it a little more user-friendly in terms of one-handed use. This was one of the first like this with one-handed usability, and I love it for that. Like the Rexford RUT, it has additional tools built in. So you've got a hex wrench or hex driver here, a little pry tool, and this is a bottle opener. And then inside, if you take the blade out, there are all these little teeth, little itty bitty grooves. That is a universal wrench. I don't remember what all sizes it works with, but this has come in handy a couple of times. Not a lot. It's not one of those things that I like, you know, clamor over. I don't love that it has a universal wrench, but it has saved me a couple times, just a few, in like 2 years. So just keep in mind it's there. It does have a pocket clip too. That's something I really liked about this one. I don't really use the pocket clip a whole lot now, but it is removable. So you can take the whole thing apart. There's a little pin that holds the pocket clip in place. Remove the pin, clip comes out, put it back together. This one also has a magnet inside, so it doesn't really rattle, but it does when you have the blade extended. So that magnet's only in contact when the blade is all the way in. But that's not something that really bothers me. It's just something I figured I'd let you guys know about. But this one does come in 2 colors. You have a stonewashed and then a PVD black. Obviously, the original version, which you can still buy, is not covered in topographic lines. There's not much else to say about the TPT Slide except for the price. These range from $80 to $95. Obviously, the original is going to be on the lower end, and these custom ones are on the upper end of that pricing scale. So a little cheaper option than the Rexford RUT, and I prefer it due to the one-handed operation. But as I mentioned with that one, with these Linux Gold blades, it's not gonna matter. Even if you put a Linux Gold blade inside here, you still really only get the functionality of those 2 grooves. You can't extend the blade further or less. It's just these 2 stop points right there, just barely extended and fully extended. So keep that in mind. It will not work with some blades. It'll work with the Linux Gold, but it won't give you the added range of those extra grooves. So next up we have what I think is the most useful, most interesting, maybe even the best overall utility knife on this list, and it's a flipper. This comes from Exceed Designs, and this is the TiRant. It's on bearings, and it's a titanium frame lock with a stainless steel lock bar insert. It's basically a knife, but instead of having a blade, it has a blade holder for a utility knife. Very clever design, very, very useful, very handy. Unlike most of the other knives on this list, you can hold it like a real knife. You can get a whole grip on it. So super handy, but like I said, it's more of a standalone product, a dedicated knife that you would carry in your pocket versus a supplementary like this, right? I wouldn't just carry this. I could, but I wouldn't just carry a utility knife like this. But this one is much more like that. You get a lot more of that blade accessible when you're cutting. I just think it's a really cool concept. And to add to it, they include an entire set of spare hardware. So you have all the body screws, you got another lock bar insert. You actually can swap the lanyard loop out for a pry end, which is really neat if you want to do that. They include a little Torx tool in the box with it. You got another pivot. It's a whole nother pivot assembly. This is another, looks like a stop pin, I believe. Maybe that's just a screw, I'm not sure. And then a pack of utility knife blades. Like, this is how this thing comes, with a whole spare set of hardware, which is really, really nice. Now, I will say, they sent me 2 of them. One of them was to give away, but I stripped the pivot. So I'm gonna have to get another set of hardware from them, I believe. But I stripped the pivot on one. I didn't want to strip it again, so I've, not messed with it. So I need to use a soldering iron, which I don't have here, so I can take the pivot out and put that pry end on. That's what I was trying to do on video. Didn't work out. So just so you know, that hardware is there as an option. Blade swapping on this is also very, very simple. You just separate these, very similar. All of these are really, really similar. Push this, separate. You can pull the blade out and flip it around if you want, just to extend the life of it, and push it back in. Very simple, straightforward, common way to change blades on a utility knife. But now that brings us to the best part about this knife, and that is the price. The Exceed Designs TiRant V2, $60. It's kind of unbelievable when you think about it. Compared to a lot of the other knives here on the table, this one is, I think, all around the best one. For price, usability, user-friendliness, everything about it, this thing is fantastic. But the next one is also from Exceed Designs. This is the TiRant Razor M. So you might be looking at this thinking, wow, that's an awfully lot like a Gil-Tek RUK. And that was actually my first thought when I saw this thing. Here is the RUK-S. Looks awfully similar, doesn't it? few things are different, but it uses the patented Gil-Tek lock. Yes, that's patented. And I was like, man, it's gonna be hard for me to talk about. It's kind of a knockoff, isn't it? No, it is not. This is a licensed version of or the lock at least is licensed from Gil-Tek. So quite nice. I really like that they went the official route with that and made this an officially licensed product and not a ripoff. And for that, I can really, get behind this, because this is one of the most minimal, lightweight slide design EDC utility knives out there. Again, this is the Razor M from Exceed Designs. This one, $38. It's in titanium too. Like, that's nuts. It's skeletonized, so it's super lightweight. It has a little pry tool right here on the corner, and then this is a giant lanyard loop, so you can put your lanyard or beads or whatever you want on it, or a key ring. If you want to just attach this to your keys, it'd be really good for that, because it is so small and lightweight. Although I do think the action on this is a little more finicky, and it could be, honestly, just the blade. Ooh, this is tight in there. The action on it is a little sticky. Anyway, this is the Exceed Designs TiRant Razor M, and I think for 38 bucks, it's a really good price on something like this. Really small, lightweight, minimal, and if that's what you're after, this thing is great. So moving right along, we have what I just showed you, the Gil-Tek RUK-S, and it is, for all intents and purposes, about the exact same as the TiRant Razor M. Skeletonized, open-face design, very small, lightweight. This one is a little bit bigger than the TiRant, but I think the action is much better on this. I would say the action on this isn't as good as some older designs. I don't know if that's just me or what. Maybe it needs to be broken in a little more. But this copper one that I carried a lot, just buttery smooth. This one, not quite, but the aluminum, the coated aluminum ones are usually the smoothest options. And this one also comes in a left-handed version, which is really nice, because a lot of these are exclusively right-handed. The Gil-Tek sometimes comes in left-handed options. But there are a few changes over the course of, a few years with the Gil-Tek RUK. The original right here had no pry tool, and it was mainly just a bottle opener and a utility knife. The next iteration kept the bottle opener, added a pry tool and this little cord cutter at the bottom, and instead of having this screwed design, it's actually a pin design. So you push these pins out and they slide apart, so there's no tools. You can take this apart without tools, and those little pins actually allow a surface for the blade to run across so it doesn't dull the blade. So made a few changes between the first and second generation, and then we have the Slim, which is a little narrower in this dimension, and it gets rid of that cord cutter, which I think is totally fine, because I've never used it. Tyler told me he added that cord cutter to the V2 because his brother goes fishing a lot, and it was a really good option for cutting fishing line. I never used it, and then the bottle opener's gone, which I think is good. This was not the greatest bottle opener. I mean, it worked fine, but it kind of looks weird. But I think it's unnecessary, because if you really want to, you can just use the pry end to pop off a bottle, just grab the bottle in. So I think it's unnecessary to have a bottle opener, and everything has a bottle opener. Everything is a bottle opener. But with this one, I think it's really hard to argue anything about it. Like, it's hard to complain about anything. Action's pretty good, and blade change is super easy, very quick. You just push forward, so you've got to get the blade past a little notch here, so push it all the way out, pull up, and push. Pretty simple. Blade's not going to come out accidentally, and it's just really reliable, really affordable. So the pricing on this, I think, is one of the best things about it. This aluminum version is $20. Left or right-handed, doesn't matter, 20 bucks. It also comes in brass, and that one's going to be $40. So if you want to step it up a little bit, you can get one in brass, but that's all for now. I don't know if he's going to come out with these in titanium. It'd be nice to see him in titanium, but again, this aluminum one is totally fine. It does its job, and it's 20 freaking bucks. So really great utility knife option for not much money. I mean, that's getting into Gerber territory, so that's really cool. And it's made in America. Another really minimal lightweight version of a utility knife. This was originally called the Resolute X1. I talked about this back, I believe it was a micro carry or minimalist carry video I did. I can't remember, it's been a while. But this has rebranded. It's no longer Resolute. If you see these on Amazon, I thought originally it was just ripped off. Somebody had just made a knockoff, but no, Resolute rebranded. Now this is called the Aerocrafted Sideslip instead of the Resolute X1. So this one has a little bit of a different locking mechanism. It's got this slide up here. This creates some tension on it. It's a little springy. And then this slide can just notch into these two notches. You only have two possible points where you can extend the blade out. And I think it's one of the shortest when the blade is fully extended, which isn't super helpful, but if you're just breaking down boxes, this is plenty. This was the smallest, most lightweight by far. It still has a pocket clip, which is really neat. But the thing I don't like about this one, and I want to keep calling it Resolute X1, but the Aerocrafted Sideslip, is the way you change blades. So you have to take this little brass slider or carriage or whatever you want to call it and pull up on it and slide the blade back. And the blade comes out the backside. It's just kind of weird and finicky, and then getting it back in there. So you slide the blade in, get it in this back groove. You've got to slide this in just right. I still don't know how to do it after months of doing this. Definitely got the most complicated blade change process, without a doubt. I know I've done this before without this much issue, but yeah, this is not going to plan. So yeah, I think if I did that again, I needed to refresh myself, but if I did it again, it would be a lot faster. So we'll take that out. We'll just flip the blade around for the sake of it. It's not as bad as I made it seem the first time, but it's definitely the most complex. Action's really smooth on it, and again, this thing is like an ounce or less. It's so lightweight, so minimal. This is something I wouldn't mind if I am backpacking, like throwing this down to have a little extra something to cut in case my knife failed. Like, that's what this is really great for. It's just like really great backup tool that you can forget about because it is so small and so lightweight. Price on this one is $85, which puts it in like TPT Slide territory. And I think for that, I think it's good. It is more lightweight and definitely more minimal, but my preference still would reside with the TPT Slide because it's got, you know, easier blade changes and stuff. But I think it's definitely got its place in the market. It is definitely super, super lightweight. Going in the complete opposite direction, we have the Gerber utility knife. This is the Prybrid. So it gets its name because it has a giant pry tool at one end. This is a bottle opener. You've got a cord cutter up here and the blade, which action on it is fine. It's not great, not horrible. This thing is 20 bucks. This is G10 and steel, so it's heavy. This thing's big. I mean, look at it compared to the TiRant, just to give you a size scale of the Prybrid. Lay them down. This thing is freaking huge and heavy. It's definitely the heaviest one, no doubt in my mind, but it's a beefcake, and I do feel like it could take more of a beating than most of these utility knives. It's just, you don't extend it all the way out, you extend it there. People were complaining to me that I was extending it all the way out when I talked about this in a previous video, but you can, if you really need to make that extension, you can, but the ability to extend it all the way out here is really just to change the blades, which is easy enough on this one, but it's kind of harsh on the fingers, if I'm gonna be completely honest. It's got a lot of tension on this blade. For 20 bucks, I think this thing's a great deal, and you're comparing it to this. So really at the $20 mark, you either want something super minimal and lightweight, or you want something kind of beefy and something you can get a better grip on. Like this has got grooves for 3 of your fingers, and that's all it is, right? 3-finger grip. This thing is easily, when that blade's extended, easily a full 4-finger grip if you need it, or, you know, there's various ways to grip this. But Gerber Prybrid for 20 bucks, I think it's a really good option. It's a toss up between these two. My personal opinion, I would go with this one just because it's way lighter. This thing is huge, and it's gonna just float in your pocket or have to go in a pouch or something because it is so big. Now, Gerber does have a smaller, lighter option, which I don't consider this a utility knife. That's why it's not included in this list. This one uses these craft blades, like X-Acto blades, so not a utility knife. There is a smaller, lighter option, but it's not a utility knife, so the one that gets in this video is the Gerber Prybrid, not the X. So now we're on to the T&P, or Tactical and Portable Avis-Pry. I have to say this is probably my least favorite one. It looks pretty nice because I got this brass and titanium combo, but this one's just not super user-friendly to use. You've got a button lock similar to others, but it doesn't move the bar or anything. I think it's just you push that in and move the blade forward. With this, you get many of the same tools you get with the Rexford RUT and the TPT Slide. You have a hex wrench or hex driver here, a little pry tool there, a bottle opener, and a very large keyring loop or lanyard hole. And same deal, you can just push this in, blade slides back. So closing it is totally fine, but opening it, not so much. And when it comes to the size for this thing, it just seems kind of unnecessarily chunky, because you've got these two right here, which are the closest to it. And it's just, there are margins all around the sides of that blade that I don't think necessarily need to be there. It's not big or, you know, oversized, but it's chunky, thick, a little heavier because of that brass, but a little unnecessary in terms of size and usability. Just, I think it could be better. And in speaking in terms of that, it's also not very ergonomic to use, like, because it is so blocky. I mean, it's fine in the hand, but nothing exceptional. Definitely very finicky. And the price is okay. It's definitely closer to the original TPT in price at $65, so not horrible. I got this one from Urban EDC Supply. I think it's good for what it is, but not the best by any means. Next up, we have the most expensive utility knife on the table. This is the Chaves CHUB, and it is very unapologetic in every dimension, just like many Chaves knives. It's got that big, in-your-face skull clip. It's very thick and chunky. It's not very heavy, surprisingly, so I think there's a lot of skeletonized milling on the inside. But the way this one works, there is a button right here. You push it down, and you can actuate the blade out. So you've got 3 stop locations. One is right there, which is barely out, if you just want to, I guess, nick some tape maybe. The next one is right there, and then you can fully extend it. And this might be similar to the Gerber one, where that's just for a blade change, but if you really need that extra length, you can definitely go there. And I don't think you're really running a risk of this blade coming out of there at that extension. But the same deal with some of the others, you're not going to be able to use those 4 grooves. That's really something you're only going to get out of like the Rexford RUT or the original TPT, the ability to really finely tune how far that blade comes out. But having these 3 stops is really about all you need. The problem with the CHUB, if you ignore how hard they are to get, they're very often not available for purchase. So that aside, the problem with it is that it's not really anymore the best at anything. It used to be one of the best at being like a full-on pocket-sized utility knife. It's not that anymore. With the TiRant, it's really not. It is much more robust than the TiRant, but it's also not the most usable in terms of like full hand grip. The TiRant kind of nails that, and the next one I'm going to talk about kind of nails that. But it is very, very, very tough feeling, and I still like it. But at $185, can be kind of a tough sell. It's thick, chunky, you're not going to forget it's in your pocket, but it's not quite a knife replacement. So it kind of exists in a weird middle ground when it comes to utility knives. Now, I did mention that Chaves recently released a CHUB flipper, so that kind of puts it back in contention here. That one is definitely much more of a knife replacement versus this one, which is going to be more supplementary. I think they're around the same price, but I missed the drop, so I didn't get my hands on one. And big boon for it, it comes in a micarta handled version, so kind of want one now. So keeping my eyes peeled, but not available. The Chaves CHUB, $185. I think before, when they first came out, this was definitely among the best utility knives that you could get your hands on. But now I think it's just good. It's good, not great anymore. And the last one, I really, really, really like this one. I want to love it, but the reason I don't is the blade change. So this is the Serge Knives Slipjoint Razor. It's got a decent price on it. It's super usable because it's a full hand grip. It is like a slip joint replacement, and you get the most blade, the most edge, I'll say, out of any of these utility knives. For sure, it goes to the Serge Slipjoint Razor. It's just a really cool slip joint. It's all titanium, and it looks good. It's unique, and I think it's really, really usable, which some of these utility knives sacrifice for pocketability. This one doesn't. It's got a nice clip on it, and it is a slip joint with a half stop. Not much else to say about it than that. It has some of the best ergos. It's one of my favorites to carry. However, to blade change, you have to have a Torx. I think that's a T6. Looks like a T6. You have to have a T6 on you just to be able to change the blade, which is a little ludicrous. Like, that sucks. It's not the end of the world because most of the time I've got a T6 around me, but if I'm out somewhere doing something and the blade breaks or is just totally dull and I don't have a T6 with me, I can't change the blade. So for that one, it gets a huge negative mark from me, but at $115, it's still really cool, something you can carry every single day. But if you're gonna be out using the absolute crap out of something like this and you're not gonna have that T6 on you, maybe go with something else that can change blades a lot easier. But anyway, that is the Serge Knives slip joint razor. And again, availability is probably gonna be the absolute worst thing about this knife because like many Serge designs, they're not always available, which is unfortunate, but that is part of the EDC world. Availability being an issue. What do you know? And then the honorable mention I had mentioned at the beginning of the video is the Maker knife from Jaco Whatever. These are $46. I got mine on Kickstarter. I backed it way back when, and this showed up after I did the first video, I believe. But I like this knife in so many ways. I think it is one of the best utility knives that you can buy, period, besides one massive glaring flaw, and that is that this thing opens in my pocket a lot. I had to stop carrying it. So it has this adjustable detent right here. There's a little screw. It's actually got reverse threads, and it's got I think it's a steel ball, not ceramic, but a steel ball pressed down into it. Really hard to see, but you can adjust how far that extends and adjust how tight the lockup is when it's closed. I had this thing fully extended. It came with a spare, and I swapped out that detent ball. Didn't matter. This thing just opened in my pocket all the time. I'd reach into my pocket, pull it out, and it was already like that. And it wasn't opening when I pulled it out of my pocket. It was just open in my pocket. So for that, I just could not come to carry this thing anymore. This instead stays in my toolbox at the shop because I think for a shop knife, this thing's awesome. Really, really awesome. Carrying it in a pouch, awesome. Carrying it in your pocket, I don't think it's safe. But the whole idea behind this one is the unique lock mechanism. So you can fling it open and closed, but when it's opened, the blade doesn't come back out, like, or you know, go back in. Like, it's super cool, like really cool. And I like that a fellow YouTuber made this knife, but I just can't vouch for it when it's opened in my pocket. I know at least 20 times. So I had to stop carrying it, but it's really neat. It's a really cool design. Blade change, very similar to old utility knives, like super easy. This thing is made for utility, right? Just getting the job done. But for everyday carry, it's not something that I could recommend. I actually am supposed to put that. There we go. Anyway, that is the honorable mention with the Maker knife. So that's it, guys. Lots of utility knives here. Everything is going to be linked down below. I think all of these are pretty good, with the exception of the T&P. It's just not my favorite at all. Like, I don't think there's any massively redeeming feature of it. I think it works fine, but you know, most of these that I have over here on the table are really, really good. I think the most unique and usable and best bang for your buck is definitely the TiRant. This thing is just really good. Like, there's nothing to complain about. They include extra hardware, twos of everything, I think, except for the pocket clip and the frame and the blade holder. Like, it's really hard to complain about this thing at all. And for 60 bucks, like, it's really good. So when it comes down to what I carry the most, without a doubt, hands down, my favorite two. I can't really choose one. I think if I did, it'd go to the TPT Slide, but then you guys are just gonna say I'm biased. No, it's the other way around. I chose this because I really, really like it. But Rexford RUT, TPT Slide, I think they're my favorites. There you go. Those are my top 3 picks out of this whole list. Hope you guys enjoyed it, found it helpful. If you did, hit that thumbs up button down below. But with that said, and until next time, carry on.